August 30th, 2005. John Keller has just survived the devastating rain and gale force winds of Hurricane Katrina, but his struggle for survival is just beginning. Bang! His 5-story apartment building in Midtown New Orleans has become an island in a desolate sea. The busy streets and bustling sidewalks of his neighborhood are now buried under 11 feet of standing water. Bang! There are 240 people currently taking shelter in the building. Half of them are elderly. One of them is 9 months pregnant. With the water levels rising and the situation getting worse, supplies are beginning to run low. Food, clean water, prescription medications, insulin. The reserves are dwindling. Bang! These are his friends, his neighbors. They have all looked up to John Keller for leadership, for help. They are his people, and he is going to do everything humanly possible to keep them alive through one of the worst natural disasters in history. Bang! But now John Keller has a new problem. He has awoken to the sound of 3 men trying to kick down the door of his apartment. Bang! But here's the thing about John Keller. He is 6 foot 8 inches tall. He weighs 240 pounds. He is a highly decorated U.S. Marine Corps veteran. He earned medals for bravery under fire in Iraq when he was deployed with Marine Force Recon. John Keller gets out of the bed. He walks to the door. He takes hold of the handle, and he waits for one more bang. Hello, and welcome back to Badass of the Week. My name is Ben Thompson, and I am joined once again by badass producer Andrew Jacobs. Andrew, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me. I think I'm required to be here at this point.
You kind of are sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
You're contractually obligated to appear on the show every once in a while.
Yeah. So I guess it's not thanks. It's just doing my job.
Well, I was just being nice. I was just being formal.
Yeah. Sure.
It's just something you're supposed to
Appreciate
say.
it.
Just like, here he is again. Yo.
Yeah. Thanks to the listeners who tolerate me.
Yes, there we go. So you, right before we started recording, you alluded to a story that I was not familiar with, and you were very excited that I hadn't heard this story before or didn't know what you were talking about.
Well, let's save that. We're talking about hurricanes.
Yes.
So our episode today is going to be about someone who survives and helps others survive a hurricane. And there's an incident related to that hurricane in the media. We'll get to that. I think maybe at the end of the episode, it'll make more sense there. But I mean, I think our episode, what I will say is I think our episode is timely. I wish it could be timelier. I wish it were airing when we were recording it, because I know right now Hurricane Milton is approaching Florida.
Yes.
And they are telling people, please evacuate, these areas. So if you're listening to this, I assume you have evacuated and you are safe. But sad we cannot be reminding our listeners to do that in advance.
Yeah. So, this is hurricane season, right? I'm from Florida, and the joke in Florida is that you have like 3 seasons. You have the rainy season, you have summer, and you have hurricane season, and that's kind of it. And so we have just had Helene come through, and now we have Milton. As of the recording of this, Milton is on the way to Florida, and we are, sending positive thoughts to everybody who is in the affected areas. But Andrew, have you ever been in a hurricane? Because that's a thing that's like not that weird for me coming from Florida.
Well, so I'm from California, so earthquakes were my thing. Mm-hmm. But I lived in New York, and I was there during Hurricane Sandy, actually. And I was living in the lower half of Manhattan when the power went out. So we were without power, like in my apartment, for like a good 5 days or something like that. It was for some reason, I will say NYU had power. If people lined up around the block to plug into the plugs that were outside the buildings at NYU to charge their phones. Yeah. But I mean, Hurricane Sandy in New York, I mean, there you go. I remember walking over the West Side and looking in like lowered garages, just like in cars underwater and stuff. But I think what I love about New York in a disaster is the community really comes together.
Yeah.
I remember, the pizza places all sort of like opened up. They're like, we don't need electricity. All we need is fire and gas, and we got to cook this dough and make this pizza and feed people. And some of the bars even opened. They were like, our beer's going to go cold. Drink it now. And this is like the next day, 2 days later, that, these places were just like out there trying to, feed people and keep people sort of, in good spirits.
Yeah, and that's so important in a time like that, in disaster times. Yeah, I was in Florida when Hurricane Andrew hit in '93. I was in middle school when that came through, and that
was a big one.
That was a big one. Yeah, it blew out a lot of stuff in our house or in our yard and stuff. That one was pretty bad. I've been through tons of them, but like Andrew was the big one. One weird thing about Andrew was that it kind of did a lot of destruction to the Miami Metro Zoo, and a lot of things escaped. And it was really interesting because for a long time after that, like you'd be at a Burger King and there'd be a bunch of green parrots eating out of the dumpster out back because they all escaped, and then they just started reproducing in the wild. Like peacocks got out, and peacocks became like this big problem in Florida because there's like 1 million peacocks everywhere. And they're super loud. They make this horrible, giant, loud noise.
It sounds like a child yelling for help.
Yes.
Help!
Yeah.
You're like, oh God,
what is that?
It's just a peacock.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I was never like really that afraid of hurricanes, because the thing with hurricanes, because people will be like, oh, Florida, you get hurricanes. That's so scary. But I would always say, no, it's like you have a couple of days notice, right?
You know it's coming.
Coming, and there's some stuff you can do you can't always fully prepare for it, but you have a little bit of warning. You were talking about earthquakes. That always scared me because they come up out of nowhere and you don't expect them, and you can't predict
any
them.
moment. The last earthquake we had, I was in a Zoom meeting, and the person on the other side of the Zoom was like in Washington D.C. Watching me. All of a sudden, I could just imagine them watching me like jump out of my chair because I was like freaking out. and he was literally like, "Hey, I think you're supposed to like get under a doorway or something." Like on Zoom, I'm like experiencing this earthquake, and he's telling me what to do on Zoom. It's like, I'm not a fan of earthquakes. I was in New Orleans a couple of years ago when a hurricane also came through. I was there with some friends, and they shut down the French Quarter. They were like, we're not messing around. This is serious. Yeah. So we bought a bunch of drinks and stayed in the hotel, but the hurricane like turned at the last minute, and they were like, the French Quarter's back open. And so everyone went back out at like 10 o'clock.
That happened all the time. Like when I went to Florida State for college, and there would be the hurricane turns at the last minute. And so it'd be like, okay, school's all canceled tomorrow, blah, blah, blah. Do that all ahead of time because the hurricane's coming tomorrow. Everybody stay home. And then it would turn, and then we would just have the day off from school, and we just have big parties and stuff.
Yeah. Well, Hurricane Milton is approaching, and it looks like a bad one. Yeah. So I have a feeling we'll still be talking about the hurricanes next week, which I think makes this story that we're about to tell a worthwhile one.
This story is amazing. It's about a guy who was right in the midst. You were talking about the French Quarter. You're talking about New Orleans. He's in the middle of New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, which to date is still the most, deadliest and most costliest hurricane in American history. And he was right in the middle of that, stuck in a really heavily affected area. And while he was there, he was in an apartment building, a 5-story apartment building with 200 to 250 people. And he kind of took it upon himself to do what you were talking about with the pizza places. He decided he was going to take care of all these people. He was going to take charge of this building and make sure that all 240 people got out of there alive. And it's a pretty amazing story. And John Keller is a really amazing guy. So this is one of my favorite stories ever. And we're really excited to tell you guys about it. But first, we're going to take a really quick break to hear a word from our sponsors. So stick with us. And when we come back, we are going to tell the story of John Keller and his heroics during Hurricane Katrina. Welcome back to Badass of the Week. I am here with my producer, Andrew Jacobs. And Andrew, we are talking about Hurricane Katrina in 2005. And this is still the worst hurricane that the U.S. has ever experienced.
I think it's certainly the most costly, for sure. It's something like $125 billion worth of damage done. In terms of lives, the estimate, and it's still estimates, is around 1,300 to 1,500 lives lost in the hurricane, which, when you think about, I think we've been talking about Hurricane Helene, which is really bad, and it's a couple hundred lives have been lost, which is a tragedy. We're looking here with Hurricane Katrina, it was like 1,300 to 1,500 lives.
Over the course of days, because the big problem with this one wasn't even so much because the storm was a day, but then the levees broke and flooded the entire city. And the flooding, and it just kept coming. It kept getting worse and worse and worse as the days went by.
And here's the thing. We were talking about Hurricane Andrew, Ben, that made landfall in some places as a Category 5 and then de-intensified to a Category 4, and at some points was a Category 3. And it just, Hurricane Andrew, just massive damage across Florida. Now, Hurricane Katrina showed up at one point was a Category 5, when it was over the Gulf, but by the time it hit New Orleans, it was actually only a Category 3. But the problem is the part of it when it's a 5 over the Gulf causes the water to surge in such a way, and this is what I understand is happening with Milton, is it's only going to hit as a 3, but the water levels rise because the storm drives it. And with New Orleans, the levees didn't hold, and it caused 80% of the city was flooded with Hurricane Katrina, and that it wasn't the storm damage, from the winds and everything, certainly, caused some fatalities, but it was sort of the devastation afterwards, the people getting stuck, the lack of food, the lack of clean water, the lack of being able to, get to dry land, that was just taking lives.
And the inability to get aid in also, right?
Yeah.
So the response was very difficult it was a slow response, and it was hard to get aid into the people who needed it. You had to helicopter lift food and medical supplies.
You can't drive trucks,
right.
with food in there.
You couldn't get an
when
ambulance
this whole city's flooded.
Yeah, it's 11 feet of water. You can't drive an ambulance through that, right? So everything had to be by helicopter, and there was just the amount of work to be done was unbelievable, and a lot of people suffered, and a lot of people died in the days and weeks after the hurricane hit.
This was a disaster that you could watch on TV and see it, and there was almost nothing you could do. There was nothing you could do about it.
Yeah,
because it's just water rising and rising and rising, and I mean, you could show up with a boat.
Right. And that was it. But even that is dangerous too, because and we'll get into some of the reasons why that was dangerous. But yeah, so this is a really bad situation in New Orleans.
It's a dire situation.
Following Hurricane Katrina. And one of these buildings in New Orleans, kind of in the epicenter of where all of the water is rising and the flooding is happening, is a 5-story apartment building called the American Can Apartments. And inside that building lives a man named John Keller. He is 6'8". He's 250 pounds. He is big, strong. He's a former Marine. And he is the hero of our story here. He is the guy that is going to be the protector of this apartment building and, defending it and getting help for the people who live there. So John Keller, he went to a nice boarding school when he was a kid. He was class president. He was captain of the yacht team. He went to Xavier University to study marine biology, but he dropped out of school. He left school in
a very upstanding citizen from day one.
Yes,
I love
exactly.
That.
It gets better and better and better with this guy. And so in 1990 he left Xavier University in the middle of his degree so that he could join the military and serve in Desert Storm, when the American invasion of Iraq.
Yeah.
And so
the first invasion of Iraq for maybe some of our younger listeners.
Yes. And so John S. Keller Jr., he drops out of Xavier University. He becomes a radio operator for the 1st Recon Battalion, 1st Marines. And Marine Force Recon is kind of their special forces, like the toughest guys they have go into that. And they're like the first guys that get sent in to special operations. So he was part of a 6-man special ops team. He was the radio operator. He's going in to fight Iraqi Republican Guard and get cited for bravery under fire for his actions during Desert Storm. So he's pretty tough.
Yeah.
He leaves after he does his tour. He retires as a lance corporal, and then he goes back to Xavier University and finishes his degree in marine biology.
A Marine with a degree in marine biology.
Yes.
Loving it.
Yeah, Marines everywhere. And so then he after he graduates, he opens a successful commercial development firm. And when he's not working at that, which seems like a lot of work, he volunteers to teach scuba diving to inner city youth, and he works in soup kitchens to feed the homeless.
And did he also walk to work uphill both ways, barefoot in the snow?
Yeah, I mean, this guy John Keller he's awesome, right? He's just
that's all. The funny part is he was teaching. It feels like that's the sort of thing you would put on your resume, like teaching inner city youth how to scuba dive. It's like, no, he was legit doing that.
Yeah, he was actually doing that, right? And so he's living in New Orleans, and he's there. He's at the American Can Apartments when Katrina hits, and he wakes up the next morning. He's been sleeping. He sleeps through the hurricane. Next morning, he's awoken by the sound of banging on the front door of his apartment. Somebody is trying to kick in the door to his apartment.
This is after the hurricane has hit.
The morning after the hurricane has hit.
It's come through.
There's devastation. He wakes up. He hasn't looked out the window yet. He's awakened out of bed. Like, he's probably stayed up late the night before with watching the hurricane, watching the news, whatever. Power's out. And he gets woken up by 3 guys trying to kick in his front door. And so what does he do? Remember, this guy's 6'8", he's 250, he's a combat veteran. He gets up and he hears the banging on the door, and it's just like bang, bang, bang. And he tries to time the rhythm of it. And so after one kick, right when the next kick's about to come, he flings the door open, and the guy comes flying in like he was going to kick the door. He comes flying in, and John Keller just basically grabs this dude and throws him out of not just out of his apartment, but like there's these 3 guys, and he's much bigger than all of them. And he probably put a little bit of that North of Scotland stuff on him, but he basically just, the way I envision it is he grabs them by the collar and by the belt loop on their pants, and he just throws them right out the front door of the apartment building into 11 feet of standing water because the entire street is flooded outside.
Great.
So these guys are out.
That's like a John Wick move right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Just chucks these 3 guys right out of the building into the water. Have fun. Fend for yourselves. And
that's one way to start your morning.
Yeah. These guys were looking to loot apartments. There was devastation. A lot of people had evacuated. These guys are in there trying to loot and rob and take advantage of this catastrophe. And they weren't expecting that when they kicked open the door, they were going to run into a dude that looked like Jaws from Moonraker,
Yeah.
And so he chucks these guys out, and then he kind of has a chance to assess what the situation is, and it's bad. He is in Midtown New Orleans, and everything is underwater. The apartment building is under 11 feet of water. You can't get out the front door. He probably had to throw him out a window, my guess.
Maybe he was on the second story.
Yeah. And so he's looking around and he's like, all right, well, this is kind of a bad situation, but he's a Marine Corps combat diver. He actually owns a kayak and he has it stashed in the garage beneath the building. And so he's like, all right, I could get out of here, but then he starts thinking about his neighbors. And one thing about this apartment is that it's got a lot of elderly and disabled residents. And, he just had to fist fight three goons, but some of these other people aren't going to be able to. And there's a great quote from him. He says, I couldn't have lived with myself knowing that I could have saved everybody in here, but I left. You know what I'm saying? How could I have done that? And I was like, well, I think a lot of people would have, but John Keller didn't.
That is a Marine right there.
Yes. So, the situation here is pretty bad. There's 11 feet of water outside and it's rising every hour or so. It rises a couple inches. There's no indication of when that's going to end. There's no power. There's no running water. There is, the place can only be accessed, like you said, by boat or by helicopter. And the boat transportation is dangerous because it's a flooded city. You've got things in the water, right? You've got a parking meter that could clip the underside of a boat and spring a leak. There's, this is New Orleans. There's alligators. There's poisonous snakes in the water. There's all kinds of
toxins.
Yeah, the cars, like the water, when cars get submerged, like the gas comes out of them. It flows to the top, right? You've got gasoline. It's not safe to swim in. It's not safe to be in. It's not safe for boating.
I don't even know if anyone knew where to go at that moment either.
Yeah, there was no way to, there was no TV. You couldn't turn your power on. You didn't know where to go. So there's 244 people inside the building by the end of the day. 170 of them are residents and 74 people have come in from other areas, right? The American Can is 5 stories. If your home or your apartment building was 1 or 2 stories, you can't stay there. It's underwater now. You got to get somewhere safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Of this group, about half of them are over the age of 65, and a quarter of those people are confined to wheelchairs.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. And some of these 74 people who have come in from the nearby housing projects, some of these guys are a little sketchy, right? That's where these 3 dudes who were trying to kick in the door came from. So you've got that component, and also you've got these elderly people. They need oxygen, insulin, they need their medications, they need their heart medicine, right? Not to mention basic food and water for everybody. One of the people in the American Can is a pregnant woman. She's 9 months pregnant and might give birth at any minute, right?
Jeez. Well, and it's New Orleans in August. I think it was pretty it's hot
and humid, and you have no air conditioning because all the power's out. And so these people are in big trouble, and John Keller, he's got command experience as a NCO in the Marines. He's the biggest guy, the strongest guy. He's the most charismatic guy. They need somebody to take control, and he decides he's going to be the one to do it. Okay, So what does that look like for him? First thing he does is he collects every gun in the building, and he wants to know where they all are. So give me every gun in the building. And then he distributes them to people who need to defend the building against looters and rampaging bands of looters, because that happens.
I love that as a reminder we have many listeners around the world. This is the United States of America.
Yes, that is a very American response to that. But I need to know where all the guns in the building are.
Everyone bring me your guns. I like to imagine old guys rolling up in a wheelchair with a AR-15, be like, I got this.
It's for self-defense.
Bunch of armed senior citizens.
Yes.
Very cool.
Yeah. So there were looters that were going around looting buildings here, and also the ground floor of the American Can had a restaurant in it. And for whatever reason, whether it was generators or something, the walk-in freezer at that restaurant was still working. So they brought all the food and stuff down there and put it in that freezer to keep it cold, because they didn't know how long it was going to be before they could get help. But now that is like a target for these Mad Max bands of wandering people. So you have to have a guy there with a gun at all times to make sure nobody gets in there and steals all that stuff.
Jeez.
It's wild, right? This is the United States in the 21st century, right? But that's the world that this was at the time, right? This was complete. It was out of control. And you had to be ready for that stuff because that was happening.
Facebook existed at this point.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, this is not that long ago.
Right. Right. And so then he's got to try to get help for people. So he's got 200 people with no incoming food or water. Their supplies aren't going to last that long. He's got to get a note out somewhere. So he goes up onto the roof of the building and he busts open a fire extinguisher with a fire axe, and he takes all the powder that's in there and he starts writing out notes on the roof that for helicopters to see when they fly by, because there are like police helicopters or military.
It's like MacGyver. How would you even know to like?
Yeah, I know, right? That's how I was thinking. Like, oh, how would you come up with that? But cool, he can do that. This is a thing that this guy's good at. So he's putting notes up there like 200 people need food, water. 4 days go by and no help comes. He can see the helicopters, but they're not stopping, or they're not flying over close enough or whatever. But they can't get help, and medical supplies and food are getting low after 4 days, and it's starting to look like help's not going to come. So this is where John Keller really has to. This is where he does the first of many wild and heroic things, any one of which would be enough for him to be mentioned on the show, but all of them together just kind of create this legend of this guy. So John Keller, he's like, we need help. So he gets in the water that I was just talking about that's dangerous, and he swims to the grocery store about a mile away.
Wow.
Which is a long swim in very dangerous waters.
This isn't the pool.
Yeah, this is not the pool. This is Hurricane Katrina. This is debris and like broken glass and stuff is in the water. Like, all the stuff that got swept away by the storm is in this water now. And
they generally tell you do not get in this water at all, because the water mixes with the sewers as well. Like it's
bad. Yeah, it's really bad for you.
It's bad. Yeah.
So he swims to the grocery store and he has collected coolers, like drink coolers. And so he ties 9 coolers together with rope and puts them on his back and swims them a mile to the grocery store and then loads them up with all the food that is salvageable that he can find.
Wow.
And then he swims back and
I bet he paid too.
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah, right. I'll just leave this money here. I'll Venmo to the store owner.
Yeah.
No kidding, right? And so he swims back with the coolers that are now loaded up with food, and because they don't have gas or electricity to cook them, he drags all those coolers up to the roof and then grabs some charcoal grills and starts grilling all the food. And this was like a big heroic moment in the story, because all of these people get up onto the roof and he's like, I got burgers for everybody. It's going to be awesome. And they said they were like playing music and people were singing, and there was like this big party that everybody was up there and they were having this great time. And he had like finally, this was a big win for everybody.
Sounds like a respite for sure.
Yes. But it's going to get crazier, and the story is going to get more intense and more wild and more dangerous, and John Keller is going to do a bunch more heroic things. I think maybe this is a good part for us to take a quick break and then come back and tell the rest of the story, because just sit tight, it gets wild. Okay, so it is 2005. John Keller has survived Hurricane Katrina, and he has 240 people in the American Can apartment under his supervision. He has kind of taken over as the leader of this group. He has swam to the grocery store and got them food, but they're still not even close to being out of this problem yet. First thing he's got to deal with is everybody's running out of their prescriptions. So he goes around and he collects prescription bottles from everybody who needs them. Right, so all of these old people in the building, they give him their prescription bottles. He puts them all in a bag. And remember, I said he had a kayak. He's got this kayak in the basement of his building. He gets down there. He gets the kayak. It's in okay shape. So he's like, I'm not going to swim to the hospital, but I'll put the kayak in the water. But he didn't have a paddle for the kayak. So what he had received an award from the Marine Corps as part of his discharge. And it was like a plaque with a little, not a full size paddle, but like a little paddle that was for awesome work in the Marine Corps or whatever. And he had won some award. And and it had this small sized paddle as like a decoration of like, here's to show that you won some.
Oh my God.
So he yanks that thing off of the plaque. It's like a toy paddle.
Yeah.
And he's got to use that to paddle 7 hours through the water to the hospital with this bag of prescriptions.
I'm just imagining this like 8 foot tall man with this tiny, and he'll probably already makes paddles look small,
right?
But this is like one of those like toy,
it is.
It'd be good for like my 5-year-old.
Right. I mean, it's like, it was fancy because it was part of this trophy, but like, it looks like a child's thing in his hands. And I saw a picture of it once, and it's tiny, smaller than his arm. Right. And he rows out there with these prescription bottles, and he goes to the hospital and he's like, hey, I need you to refill all these prescriptions. And the hospital says, look, we've got 45 dead patients in here right now. We have no medication. We have nothing. We're not getting any help. We can't keep our own patients alive. We cannot spare this if we had it.
Yeah.
Okay, that sucks. So he's got to keep going. So he paddles over to the U.S. military aid station and finds a helicopter crew, Black Hawk crew. And he's like, you got to come and do something. And they say, no, not only do we not have prescriptions, but orders are orders, and we don't have orders to go over there. We can't do it. Okay, great. So he's got to come back now. He's been gone all day, right? It's 7 hours there, 7 hours back. And, he's got to tell his people that we don't have it. I can't get you aid. But this is, I think about Dawn of the Dead with this, where like you've got all of these people who are like, they're all kind of stuck in there together, and there's 240 people. They don't all get along, and they're starting to fight. They're hungry. They're jumpy. They're irritable. It's hot. Yeah.
They're dirty.
They're dying. Like they're literally in danger of dying at any moment. And so now he's got a little bit of a problem. So he gets back and he's like, no, it's coming. I couldn't get the prescriptions, but help is coming. I will find a way to get us help. Don't worry about it. Right. He doesn't give them the whole bad news because that's going to be too crushing. But there's already like people fighting when he gets back. He's been gone all day. He comes back. People are arguing and yelling. And there's this
the good times of the barbecue are over.
Yeah. There's this one group of guys, and they're like starting to get really like belligerent and aggressive. And so when he comes back, he's like, what's going on here? And they start to talk to him. And he's like, so it's one of these guys who's come in from the nearby like housing projects, and this group of guys is there, and they're starting to like, they're aggressive with the people who are living there. And then when he comes back to try to take command, they start getting aggressive with him. And I don't have the full context of what was said, but his quote is, quote, I went buck crazy on him. I told him I'd whip his ass on this roof and toss him off. When you're in control of lunatics, you got to be the biggest lunatic. And I bet that was really scary. I bet he could be real scary. If you look up a picture of this guy, he could probably be pretty scary if he's coming at you from that.
You don't want this guy going butt crazy on you.
Do not know.
Yeah.
Okay, so with things getting like this, John Keller has kind of retaken control of the building, but it's pretty obvious that like he's got to get these people out of here. It's been a week, right? That's too long. We got to get these people out of here. So he can't get people's help. He can't get any helicopters to land. So he comes up with a new plan. He says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take all the old white women in the building, and we're going to put them on the roof. So he carries these people and their wheelchairs up the stairs, because the elevator is not working right. You can't get to the roof from that anyway. So we're on there's 5th floor, and then there's the roof. So he's got to carry these people up and put them on the roof, because he's like, I got to show, if I show the helicopters what the situation is here, like I've got people in wheelchairs, like he puts them up on the roof. So he starts putting all of these people up on the roof to try to see if they can get, if that can get any kind of response from the National Guard.
Okay, hold on though. Let me just make sure that what I heard is correct.
Yes.
You said old white women.
Yes.
What?
So
do tell.
Yeah. So John Keller is black, and he has been up on the roof every single day, and he's waving at these helicopters. Nobody's helping him. Nobody's landing on him. And he kind of is just like, what can I do to get people's attention? And he starts, and this is like a really depressing part of the story, but he's like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get the old white ladies. I'm going to put them on the roof, because maybe that'll get a response. And it does. The National Guard starts dropping aid like within a few hours. And And that's one of the things that really sucks about this story is that this guy he's an American hero. He's a war hero for the United States. He's been doing all this heroic stuff. He's been working really hard to keep all these people alive, and nobody would help him until he did this. And he talks about it, and he's like, it was pretty depressing, honestly, that like that's what did it. He was like, I was just trying anything I could think of, but that worked, and that was really, we were happy to have the help and happy to have the aid, but it was kind of depressing that was what it took to get food for the people in this building. And so, but it worked, and they started getting medicine and food, potable water. And at one point, Keller is able to get one of these helicopter crew chiefs' attention, and he's like, look, we got a really serious problem. We need to evacuate these people. And the helicopter guy says, okay, I'll come back with a couple of helicopters, get everybody up on the roof, get all of your, like, the old people, the disabled people, like anybody who's having a hard time and needs to get out of here right now, get them up on the roof. So he does. He spends the entire rest of the day carrying 70 people up onto the roof for helicopter evacuation. Wow. And
and there's no elevator.
There's no elevator. So it's him, and it's
so these people are in wheelchairs.
Yes.
So he's literally physically carrying
them, right? It's like him. I mean, it's a lot of the people in the American can are helping him, right? He's got a lot of people that are on his side, and so you get 2 or 3 guys to carry a person in a wheelchair up 3 flights of stairs, but like that's a long day, right?
Yeah.
Carry all these people up onto the roof. The helicopters return. They try to land, and the roof, the building has like started to sink and is not level, and the roof is at a weird angle, and you can't land a helicopter on there. They can't make it. They can't get it to land. I say, oh, sorry, we can't get you out by helicopter. Sorry. Now you got to carry everybody back down the stairs.
That was one of the curse the heavens moments.
Yeah, they can't make it happen. I mean, I can just picture, like, this probably wasn't like a fast thing either. They were trying for like an hour or 2 to land, and everybody's like, come on, just get down here. We got to get out of here. Oh, and then it doesn't work, and it's gone. And man, okay, so now what? How are we going to get these 240 people out of here? So here we go. He's like, what you said, right? Helicopter's not going to work. There's only other way, went in and out, and that's a boat. So he dives back into the water, and he swims to a nearby house where he can find he just swims until he finds a speedboat. He finds a speedboat.
Oh, wow.
He gets in there, he hot wires it, and then he spends the next
hot
wire a speedboat. I mean, who wouldn't know how to do that?
These are things they teach you in the Marines, I guess.
Yes. So he spends the next 12 hours. It doesn't go very fast, and he can't go very fast because it's too dangerous. So
it's not really a speedboat. It
could go fast, but it doesn't. It's not going to. You can't go fast with it because it's too dangerous, right?
It's keeping it in first gear.
Yes. And so he spends the next 12 hours ferrying those 70 people to a staging area to be airlifted out, going back and forth on this speedboat. When he runs out of gas, he siphons it out of cars and other boats with a tube.
Oh my God.
He's getting tired. He's fighting through it. He's exhausted from all this stuff. He has just carried those people up the stairs all day. And at one point, after he's kind of most of the way through this, he's coming back from one of this 12 hours of trips. A group of guys is there, and they pull an AK-47 on him, and they point the gun at him, and they tell him to give up the boat. Yeah. And right. And so now he's being jacked. He's going to get boat jacked by these guys. Right. And it's like, oh my God, what else? But here's the thing with Lance Corporal John Keller is that, this is not the first time somebody's pointed an AK-47 at him. And so he responds by pulling his .45 automatic and pointing it at that guy and saying, quote, "I've been battle tested and I don't miss. Don't try me."
Those are the words of a guy who's tired and ready to leave.
Yes, don't try me. I don't even want to deal with this. Don't even make me do this. Just let me go. Let me get out of here. And they do. The pirates are just like, okay, yeah, sorry, bud. Go on your way.
Yeah.
And that's it. He ferries these people out. He gets all the people who desperately need evacuation out, and he continues to manage the building until more aid is able to come in. And because of his actions, all 244 people that had taken refuge in the American camp apartments survived. And yeah, and
that's incredible.
He did it. He saved everybody, and he continued to live in the building after the disaster was over and everything.
Yeah, still lives there.
Still lived there. Yeah,
amazing.
And and he's this kind of guy that is this kind of badass that I love, because when he was talking about it, he said, "It sure wasn't for money. It wasn't for recognition. It wasn't to be no damn hero. What made me stay was the old people. I just realized that nobody else here could have gotten those people out. They would have sat in there for 5 or 6 days, and they didn't have 5 or 6 days."
Wow.
And so that is John Keller, Marine Corps war hero. The story could have been over there. We could have just recited his citation for combat bravery, and that would have been enough to make him a badass of the week. But then he's swimming to the grocery store. He's ferrying people to aid stations. He's kayaking for help. He's beating up looters and fighting off pirates with a 45.
Saving senior citizens. Yes. I mean,
carrying wounded people.
Incredible.
Yeah, just a real American hero.
Probably punched an alligator or two.
Probably, yeah. In the movie version, he's whacking the alligators with that little little paddle. It was great because after it was over and his story started to come out, the Marine Corps reissued his award. So they gave him a new one with
hopefully with a bigger paddle.
And that's the story of John Keller. He was a hero who was in a really, really bad situation that, was able to save the lives of people who needed his help. And
so and I still owe you the anecdote that we had discussed at the beginning, which is not nearly as interesting as the story you just told, but after the hurricane, and this sort of speaks to what you were talking about with the sort of racial component of the relief efforts at Hurricane Katrina, but there was a televised fundraiser, like a nationally televised fundraiser, for Katrina relief, and I'm sure many of our listeners who are old enough remember this and some don't, but Mike Myers and Kanye West were sharing the screen talking about Katrina and all this stuff. And Kanye, maybe people don't know, is actually from the New Orleans area, and he was Mike Myers is standing next to him, and Kanye, who seemed a lot more grounded, is maybe a good way to say it, back then, is talking about how much it hurts him to see what's going on and the people there are struggling, and he just gets to, at the time the president of the United States was George Bush, and Kanye just says, and George Bush does not care about black people. And you have to watch it, because that alone is you're like, wait, what? Just to say that in a nationally televised fundraiser. But Mike Myers' face is because he's standing next to him. Mike Myers' face is just he just turns into a straight ghost.
Oh my gosh.
What? What
I've seen that quote before, here? But I've never seen the video of it. But yeah,
go watch the video just to see Mike Myers' face.
I've heard that quote before. Mike Myers is Canadian, right?
Mike Myers is Canadian. At the time, people were like, "What? This is outrageous." But I think, and I don't know that you could. I don't know that we're, the disaster relief efforts were personally directed by President Bush, but there definitely was a whole racial element to what happened with the disaster in Katrina, and then there was who was most affected and who wasn't,
and then there was a slow response in general. That was the thing of there was just kind of a lack of understanding of, the storm was over, but the levees is a big problem, right? There was a lack of understanding of like, we need to, like, we're not out of this yet. Just because the storm's over doesn't mean it's over. It's getting worse, right? You got to get help in there right now because there's like a whole thing. The levee's added this whole other component that you don't see with hurricane relief, which hurricane relief, after it's blown up, you go and you put in the blue tarps, you rebuild the stuff. But none of that was possible because the water was still rising, which was really unique to Katrina. And I think it did mess up the relief efforts, and it did, cause a lot. Made it a much costlier disaster, the costliest catastrophe in U.S. history. And so,
luckily, there were people like Lance Corporal Keller to step in, in people's moments of need.
Yes, heroes coming in when they're needed the most, and that's what this website's all about, and that's what the podcast is all about, and those are the stories we like to tell. All right. Well, that is our show for today. We really hope you guys liked it. And we really hope to see you again on the next one. Please do like and subscribe and share our show with other people who you think might like it. And please pass along the story of Lance Corporal John Keller, because he's a big hero. We really appreciate you guys, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
He's a big hero physically and actually.
Yeah, absolutely. Metaphorically and physically and literally.
Yeah. Cool. All right, stay badass.
Badass of the Week is produced by High Five Content. Executive producers are me, Ben Thompson, Dr. Patricia Larish, and Andrew Jacobs. Writing is by me and Pat. Story editing by Ian Jacobs. Mixing and music and sound design by Jude Brewer. Special thanks to Noel Brown at iHeartRadio. Badass of the Week is based on my website, badassoftheweek.com, where you can read all sorts of stories about other badasses. If you want to reach out with questions or ideas, you can email us at badasspodcast@badassoftheweek.com. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, follow, listen, and tell your friends and tell your enemies. And please leave us a rating. We'll be back next week with another one.